3 times in the snow, and I'll tell you why I'm still a virgin at 26. That's what the giant mail-order bride whispered to the lone rancher on Christmas Eve 1876. And what Josiah Blackwood discovered that night would either save his ranch or destroy everything. He thought he knew about the woman he'd just married. The stagecoach had disappeared into the blizzard 5 minutes ago, leaving Evangeline Thornton standing in front of the Blackwood Ranch like a mountain that had learned to walk, 6'2" in her worn traveling boots, shoulders broader than most men Josiah had worked alongside, hands that looked like they could snap fence posts in half. She stood in his main room now, her single carpetbag at her feet, snowflakes melting in her wheat-colored hair. The lamplight caught her face, strong jaw, gray eyes that didn't know how to look away, lips pressed together like she was holding back words that could break the world. Josiah circled her slowly, the way his father had taught him to inspect livestock at auction. Virgin pure, her letters had promised. Strong stock, built for childbearing, everything his advertisement had demanded. But there was something in those gray eyes that made every instinct in his body scream danger. "You're exactly what I ordered," Josiah said carefully, keeping his voice neutral, trying not to show how desperate he really was. 6 months. That's all he had left before Margaret's brother took everything. 6 months to produce an heir or lose the ranch his father had died building. "And you're exactly as desperate as I expected," Evangeline replied, her voice deeper than Margaret's had ever been. Steady, no tremor, no feminine apology for taking up space. She gestured toward the tintype on the mantel. Margaret in her Sunday best, delicate and dark-haired and smiling like she didn't know what was coming. "Your dead wife. She's the reason I'm here, isn't she? She couldn't give you what you needed, and now you've ordered a replacement." The bluntness should have offended him. Instead, Josiah felt something like relief. "No games, no pretense. Margaret died 3 years ago," he said. "Childbirth. The baby his son died with her. My father's will says if I don't produce an heir by June, my brother-in-law inherits everything. So yes, you're here to finish what she couldn't." Evangeline nodded once, sharp and businesslike. "Then we understand each other. A transaction. You need breeding stock. I need to escape Minnesota. Let's not pretend this is romance." She should have left it there. Should have asked where her room was, unpacked her bag, waited for the midnight ceremony. But instead, she stepped closer to Josiah, closing the distance between them until he could smell the cold still clinging to her coat, could see the tiny scar above her left eyebrow. "But I need to be honest with you now, Mr. Blackwood, before this goes any further, before you're legally bound to me, and it's too late." Something in her tone made Josiah's throat tighten. "Honest about what?" Evangeline took a deep breath, her broad chest rising and falling. "About why a 26-year-old woman built like me is still untouched, still virgin pure like your advertisement required." The room suddenly felt smaller, colder. "3 men tried, Mr. Blackwood." Her voice went flat, factual, terrifying in its calmness. 3 strong Minnesota farm boys thought they could claim me. Thought because I was unmarried and desperate that I'd be easy prey. Cornered me on my father's farm when I was 18. One dragged me into the barn behind the church after Sunday service when I was 23. Josiah's blood turned to ice. "Did they know?" The word came out like a gunshot. "Because I'm stronger than men, Mr. Blackwood. I broke the first one's arm, snapped it like kindling when he tried to pin me against the barn wall. Shattered the second one's jaw with one punch when he put his hand up my skirt. Put the third in bed for a month with cracked ribs and a concussion." She stepped even closer, and Josiah realized with a shock that she was nearly eye level with him. No woman had ever looked him straight in the eye before. "That's why I'm still a virgin at 26. Not because I'm pure and good and godly like the church ladies back home. Because I'm dangerous. Because when men realize they can't control me, they run. Because the moment they understand I won't break, they're terrified." She should have been terrifying. This massive woman who just confessed to breaking men's bones. But instead, Josiah felt something unexpected stirring in his chest. Something like recognition. Like looking in a mirror and seeing someone who'd also been called too much, too hard, too broken to love. "Why tell me this?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. "Why not just keep it hidden?" Let me find out after the ceremony when it's too late to send you back." Evangeline's fierce expression cracked, just for a moment, and Josiah saw something raw underneath, something that looked like hope wrapped in barbed wire. "Because your dead wife was delicate, fragile, the kind of woman men protect." She gestured again to Margaret's tintype. "I've heard the stories in town already," asked the stagecoach driver on the way here. "Everyone loved her. Sweet Margaret, gentle Margaret. And she died trying to give you an heir because her body couldn't handle what you needed from her." Evangeline's gray eyes burned into his. "I'm not her, Mr. Blackwood. I'm not gentle. I'm not breakable. I'm not going to fade away trying to birth your child. But I also won't let you treat me like glass. I won't spend 3 years pretending to be smaller, weaker, more feminine than I am. I won't die trying to be something I'm not just to make you comfortable." The words hit Josiah like physical blows. Because she was right. He'd treated Margaret like porcelain, protected her from every hardship, carried her over mud puddles, insisted she rest while he did the heavy work. And maybe God help him, maybe that protection had made her weaker. Maybe his fear of breaking her had actually broken her. What are you asking from me?" Josiah's voice was barely a whisper. Evangeline's hands were shaking now, he noticed. This fierce woman who'd broken men's bones was trembling as she said, "I'm asking you to see me, really see me, not as a broodmare, not as a replacement for what you lost, but as Evangeline, a woman who's spent 26 years being told she's too much, too tall, too strong, too mannish, too damaged to deserve gentleness." She swallowed hard. "If you can't do that, if you're going to look at me every day and wish I was smaller, softer, more like her, then tell me now. Let me get back on that stagecoach come morning. I'd rather die alone in Minnesota than spend the rest of my life being measured against a ghost I can never match." The wind howled outside, shaking the windows, Christmas Eve snow piling up against the door. The fire crackled on the hearth, the only warm thing in a world that had gone suddenly, terrifyingly honest. Josiah looked at this woman, this giant mail-order bride who'd traveled 1,000 miles to escape, being called a freak, who'd confessed her violence rather than hide it, who was offering him something he hadn't even known he needed, and made a choice that would change everything. "The ceremony is at midnight," he said slowly. "The preacher's coming. My foreman and his wife will witness. And after the words are said, after you're legally my wife, I want you to tell me something." Evangeline's eyes narrowed. "Tell you what? What you need from me. Not what you think I want to hear. Not what Margaret would have said. But what you, Evangeline Thornton, the woman who breaks men's bones when they try to break her, what you actually need from me tonight." Something shifted in her face. Hope, maybe, or fear, or both. "You might not like the answer," she warned. "Try me." The preacher arrived at 1:45, shaking snow from his coat and eyeing Evangeline with barely concealed shock. Reverend Hutchins was a small man, made smaller by whiskey and disappointment, and he looked at the giant mail-order bride the way most men looked at her, like she was something unnatural, something wrong. "This is the woman?" he asked Josiah, not even bothering to lower his voice. "This is my bride, Evangeline Thornton." Josiah's voice carried a warning edge. "We'll be married before Christmas Day arrives." James Cutler, Josiah's foreman, stood near the fire with his wife Ruth. Ruth was staring at Evangeline with something closer to fascination than horror, which was better than most reactions Evangeline usually got. "Well then," the preacher pulled out his worn Bible with shaking hands. "Let's make this quick. Got 3 more ranches to visit tonight, and the storm's getting worse." The ceremony lasted for minutes, maybe less. The preacher rushed through the words like they burned his tongue, barely waiting for Josiah and Evangeline to say "I do" before pronouncing them man and wife. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Hutchins said. Already closing his Bible, Josiah turned to Evangeline, and for the first time since she'd arrived, he looked uncertain. She stood taller than him in her boots. He'd have to reach up, but he did it anyway. Stepped close, put one hand on her waist. His fingers didn't even come close to spanning it, and pulled her down slightly so he could press his lips to hers. The kiss was brief, dry, more contract than affection. But when Josiah pulled back, Evangeline saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Not revulsion, not resignation, something else, something that looked almost like curiosity. "Congratulations," Ruth Cutler said warmly, pushing past her husband to hug Evangeline. "Welcome to Montana, Mrs. Blackwood." Lord knows this man needed someone with spine. The witnesses left quickly, the preacher practically running to his horse. And then Josiah and Evangeline were alone in the ranch house, legally married. Strangers who'd promised their lives to each other, without even knowing how the other took their coffee. The silence stretched between them like something physical. Evangeline broke it. "You asked what I need from you." Josiah turned from where he'd been stoking the fire. "I did. I need you to prove something to me." She started unlacing the front of her traveling dress with steady fingers. "I need you to prove you're not afraid of what I am." "I'm not." "Yes, you are." She kept unlacing, her dress opening to reveal the plain cotton chemise beneath. "Every man is. They see my size and they want to own it, control it, break it down to something manageable. Or they run from it entirely. But I don't want either of those things from you, Josiah Blackwood." Her dress pooled at her feet. She stood in her undergarments, this massive woman in the warm glow of lamplight and firelight. Her body strong and unapologetic and virgin untouched. "Take me into the snow," Evangeline said, her voice steady despite the vulnerability of standing half-naked in front of a man who was legally entitled to every inch of her now. Not in her bed upstairs. Not in this house that still smells like her perfume. Somewhere that's ours. Just ours. It's below freezing. I'm from Minnesota. "Mr. Blackwood, I know cold." She stepped closer, and Josiah could see the scar above her eyebrow more clearly now. Could see the way her muscles moved under her skin like something carved from marble. "And three times, I need you to prove you can handle a woman who's stronger than you. Push me, fight me, show me you're not afraid of what I am." Josiah's throat went dry. "You want me to force you?" "No." Evangeline's voice cracked, just slightly, and suddenly she looked younger than 26. Looked like a girl who'd been called a freak so many times she'd started believing it. "I want you to match me. Every man I've ever known has either been intimidated by my strength or tried to break it. But I don't want either. I want someone who can meet me as an equal. Even in this. Especially in this." She swallowed hard, and Josiah saw tears gathering in her eyes. "I don't want to be handled like I'm fragile. I don't want you treating me like I'll shatter. Because I won't shatter, Josiah. I can't. I'm built to survive. But just once, just one time in my entire life I wanted to feel what it's like to be with someone strong enough that I don't have to hold back. Someone who won't break when I stop pretending. To be smaller than I am." The confession hung in the air between them like something sacred. Josiah stared at this virgin giant mail-order bride who was offering him something he'd never even considered. Margaret had needed protection, needed gentleness, needed him to be careful, always careful, treating her like she was made of spun sugar and prayers. But Evangeline was offering him the opposite, was asking him to be rough, to be equal, to match her strength instead of trying to diminish it. 3 times in the snow, Josiah heard himself say, "And I won't hold back." Something flashed across Evangeline's face, relief so profound it looked like pain. They grabbed their coats. Josiah pulled on his heavy winter gear while Evangeline wrapped herself in a thick wool cloak. The Christmas Eve blizzard had intensified, snow falling so thick you could barely see 10 feet ahead. They walked past the barn, past the fence line, into the open prairie where the snow was untouched and pristine. The wind bit at their faces, their hands, but neither one of them suggested turning back. Evangeline stopped in a natural hollow where pine trees created a windbreak. She spread her cloak on the snow, and Josiah laid his coat over it. Their breath made clouds in the freezing air. "I've never done this before," Evangeline said quietly. "So if I do it wrong, there's no wrong," Josiah interrupted. He was shaking, but not from cold, from something else. Something that felt like standing on the edge of a cliff and choosing to jump. "Just be yourself. Be Evangeline." She nodded once, and then she pushed him, not gently, not playfully. She put both hands on his chest and shoved hard enough that Josiah stumbled backward, landing in the snow with a surprised grunt. Before he could recover, Evangeline was on top of him, straddling him. her powerful thighs on either side of his hips, her hands pinning his shoulders down. She was so much stronger than Margaret had been, so much more solid, so much more real. First time, Evangeline breathed, her face inches from his. First time, I take what I need, and you let me. She kissed him, then not the dry, contractual kiss from the ceremony. This was hungry, desperate. The kiss of a woman who'd spent 26 years being told she was too much and was finally being given permission to be exactly as much as she was. Josiah's hands found her waist thick and strong under her chemise. He could feel the muscles there, the raw power of her body. She could break him if she wanted to, could snap his ribs like the farm boys, could crush him, but she didn't. She was careful even in her hunger, aware of her own strength even as she took control. Her hands fumbled with his belt, his trousers. His hands pushed up her chemise, finding warm skin despite the cold. And then she was positioning herself over him. And Josiah realized with a shock that this was really happening in the snow, on Christmas Eve, with a woman he'd met 3 hours ago. Evangeline lowered herself onto him slowly, and Josiah heard her gasp pain and surprise and something else. Her virgin body was tight, resistant, and for a moment he thought she'd stop. But she didn't stop. She kept going, kept pushing, kept taking him into her body inch by inch until she was fully seated on him, her head thrown back, her breath coming in sharp gasps. Are you? Josiah started. Don't, she cut him off. Don't ask if I'm okay. Don't treat me like I'm breaking. Just, let me have this. So he did. He let her set the pace, let her move above him, using him, taking her pleasure, learning her own body's rhythms. The snow fell around them, coating her hair, her shoulders, but she didn't seem to notice. She was lost in something else, something that looked like freedom. Yes, she gasped, her movements becoming more urgent. Yes, finally, someone who isn't afraid. Her words unlocked something in Josiah. He grabbed her hips not to control her, but to anchor himself, to meet her movements with his own. And when she came apart above him, crying out into the Christmas Eve darkness, Josiah felt something shift in his chest. Some wall he'd been building for 3 years suddenly cracking open. They stayed like that for a moment, both breathing hard, both trembling. And then Evangeline smiled, the first real smile Josiah had seen from her. Wild and fierce and completely unguarded. Second time, she whispered, "Is yours?" Josiah rolled them over in one smooth motion, using his weight to pin Evangeline beneath him in the snow. She could have resisted, could have used that superior strength to keep control, but she didn't. She let him move her, position her, and something in her eyes said this was a gift, trusting someone enough to yield. Second time, Josiah said, his voice rougher than he'd ever heard it. I show you I'm not fragile either. He grabbed her wrists and pinned them above her head with one hand. With the other, he gripped her hip hard enough to bruise. Margaret would have cried out, would have asked him to be gentler. But Evangeline arched into the pressure, her eyes blazing. Don't hold back, she demanded. Don't you dare treat me like I'll shatter. So he didn't. He drove into her with force, with 3 years of pent-up grief and anger and desperate need. And instead of breaking, Evangeline met him thrust for thrust, her powerful legs wrapping around him, pulling him deeper, harder. She gasped, "Prove to me you can handle this. Prove I don't have to be small for you." Josiah felt something wild unlock inside him. He'd been so careful with Margaret, so controlled, so terrified of hurting her, and it had killed her anyway. All that gentleness, all that protection, and she died screaming while he'd been powerless to save her. But this woman beneath him wasn't asking for protection. She was demanding equality, demanding he match her strength instead of trying to diminish it. He released her wrists and grabbed her shoulders, using them for leverage as he pounded into her. The snow beneath them was melting from their body heat, turning to slush. His knees were freezing, his hands were numb, but neither of them cared. Evangeline's nails raked down his back through his shirt, hard enough to leave marks. She bit his shoulder, pulled his hair, gave as good as she got. And when she came this time, she didn't gasp or whimper like Margaret had. She roared a sound of pure triumph that echoed across the empty prairie. Josiah followed her over the edge, collapsing against her powerful body. both of them trembling and laughing and somehow more alive than either had felt in years. Third time, Evangeline whispered into his ear, her breath warm against his frozen skin, "We do it together." As equals, they moved together in the snow one final time, and this time there was no dominance, no submission, just two broken people creating something whole. Josiah's hands were gentle now but not afraid. Evangeline's strength was present, but not defensive. They found a rhythm that belonged to neither of them alone, something new, something theirs. The Christmas Eve blizzard swirled around them, but they'd created their own warmth, their own world. Their movements were slower now, more deliberate, learning each other, discovering what made the other gasp, what made them shiver for reasons that had nothing to do with cold. "I see you," Josiah whispered against her neck. "Not her, not what you think I want. Just you, Evangeline." She turned her face to his, tears freezing on her cheeks. "Say it again, Evangeline Blackwood, my wife, my equal." They came apart together this time, clinging to each other in the darkness, both of them sobbing for reasons neither could fully name. Relief, maybe, or recognition, or the sheer overwhelming grace of being seen for exactly what you are, and not being asked to apologize for it. By the time they stumbled back to the ranch house, dawn was breaking, Christmas morning light turning the snow-covered prairie into something holy. They collapsed by the fire, wrapped in blankets, their clothes drying on the hearth. Josiah's hand found Evangeline's belly flat and hard with muscle. "You're carrying my child," he said, and it wasn't a question. It was a declaration of faith. "The air my dead wife never gave me." Evangeline should have laughed at the impossibility, should have told him it was too soon to know that conception doesn't work like magic, that he was being ridiculous, but she didn't, because something had happened in that snow, something that felt like more than bodies joining, something that felt like two souls deciding to bet everything on each other. "How do you know?" she whispered. "Because we created something tonight that's never existed before, something that could only come from equals." Josiah pulled her closer. "Not from me protecting you, not from you holding back, but from both of us being exactly who we are, without apology." 9 months later, on a September afternoon when the Montana prairie was golden with late summer, Evangeline delivered twins in their bedroom, a boy and a girl, both huge, both howling with life. She laughed through the entire labor, this woman who was built for surviving. What broke delicate things? And when Ruth Cutler handed her the babies, Evangeline looked at Josiah with tears streaming down her face and said, "We made equals. Just like us." The town of Laurel Creek never quite knew what to make of the Blackwoods. Sometimes at night, people would see them in their yard wrestling, testing each other's strength, both of them laughing like children. The men would shake their heads, the women would whisper, but nobody could deny that what Josiah and Evangeline had was real. 3 times in the snow on Christmas Eve 1876, a lone rancher and his virgin giant mail-order bride had chosen to be equals instead of roles, had chosen strength over gentleness, had chosen to see each other instead of hiding, and from that impossible choice, they'd created not just an heir, but a love that required no one to be smaller than they were, a love built on matching instead of diminishing, a love that said, "Be as much as you are, and I'll meet you there." That's the kind of love that changes bloodlines. That's the kind of love that survives Montana winters. That's the kind of love that makes giants out of ordinary people, who were brave enough to stop pretending. Now, before you go, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from right now? What time is it where you are? Drop a comment below and let me know which part of this story hit you hardest. Was it Evangeline's confession? The 3 times in the snow? That moment at sunrise when Josiah declared she was carrying his heir? And if this story moved you, if it made you cry, made you think, made you believe in love that requires strength instead of smallness, then smash that notification bell right now, because I've got more stories like this coming. Stories about people who refuse to be smaller. Stories about love that demands you show up as exactly who you are. Hit that bell, leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next one.